Alrighty, gang. Here's to nights that turn into mornings and friends that turn into family. Cheers!
Happy birthday to you.
Hello. Welcome to the Friendship IRL podcast. I'm your host, Alex Alexander, and each week we explore what's working and what's not in our friendships, community, and connections. Have you ever wished you could sit down and have a conversation about what is really going on in your friendships? Well, you found your people. Join us as we dive into real-life stories and explore new ways to approach these connections. Together, we're reimagining the rules of friendship. Today, you and I are hanging out with a friend, and that friend happens to be Jenny Dreizen, an actual friend of mine. The conversation we're having today is all about community care as self-care. What does that mean? How are we integrating that into our lives? What does that look like? And how can we possibly do that with everything else we have on our plates? Now, Jenny is the perfect friend for me to sit down and have this conversation with because so much of Jenny's work centers around supporting people through all of life's changes. Jenny is the co-founder of Fresh Starts Registry, which you probably have heard about me talk about before. I am a huge supporter of Fresh Start Registry. I had Jenny's sister, Olivia, on the podcast, episode 68. I have talked about Fresh Starts Registry in my newsletter, on social media, all the places. I feel like I'm always talking about them. And if you've ever wondered why, now you know, because I'm friends with Olivia and Jenny. But Fresh Starts Registry is a registry for people who are celebrating new beginnings and brave choices. In my own words, it is basically a registry for things besides babies and marriages. So if you have somebody going through a divorce or moving into their first apartment or graduating with a degree, really anything, a diagnosis, any new beginning, brave choice, this is the registry to support your people. And Jenny has built an entire business and brand with her sister Olivia around this mission, which is so much overlap with my mission, hence why we became fast friends. Now, Jenny and I met on the internet. We have never met in person. Fun fact, she lives in Edinburgh, Scotland with her delightful husband. I'm here in Seattle. And we met because we were following each other's business accounts, messaging back and forth like, hey, I can help you with that, or I know someone for this, or how's your week going? Or I just went through that problem last week. And over time, it developed into more than just helping each other with our businesses. We were sending, how was your week? What's new with you? Those look like fun weekend plans. After a while, I got honestly pretty annoyed with the 1-minute time limit on the Instagram app when it comes to voice memos. Her and I were sending so many voice memos back and forth that I messaged her and I said, hey, here's my phone number if you want to take this friendship off the app. I did it, guys. I made the bold move. And she said, obviously. So now we just message just like any other friend, even though we've never met in person. Don't let anybody tell you you can't make friends on the internet. You totally can. Today's episode is really just a chat between two friends about our shared passion for how we help others support their loved ones. You're going to hear, it's just the two of us rambling on the way that we would if we were on a phone call. It was a really fun conversation to have. So with that, let's get to today's episode. Jenny, I am so happy you're here. It's like we get to have a hangout in person.
Isn't that why you started your podcast? Because it's why we started our podcast.
Yeah.
Just to talk to people. Yeah.
I feel like we have to tell everyone, okay, here's how this worked. I got introduced to your sister, Olivia,
yes,
who is also on the podcast.
Yes.
And we were kind of chatty, on Instagram. I tell people, I have people I hang out with on the internet.
Yes, me too.
And then I was on your podcast, Fresh Starts.
You were. Mm-hmm.
And we hung out and we got to the end of the recording and we were like, this is delightful and natural.
Yes.
And the three of
Yes.
us had a great time. So
Yes.
then I started interacting with you more on the internet. And now
Yes.
I will admit, I find myself sometimes, literally the other day, actually, I had something happen to me and I almost made a group chat with you and Olivia.
Do it. We have people do that. Oh my gosh, do
because I was like, I feel like nobody's going to understand
it. Please do it.
this
I'll do it
problem
if you don't do
that
it.
I had that is like work related.
Yes.
And I would have messaged both of you. And now, like, that's just what people need to know. We really do hang out on the internet and behind the microphones. Yeah.
We do, with headphones on and microphones, and also in our DMs constantly. Yes, I know you talk about this, but like the value of social media, I know that social media can be an incredibly toxic thing and so dangerous, and people can be terrible to each other on it. We've seen it happen. But also, if you curate your community there and you sort of, keep your gates closed a little bit and let people in as appropriate, it can be such a beautiful place. And my Instagram is such a happy place for me, like with beautiful DMs and beautiful people and doing amazing things. So I'm very grateful and I'm very excited to be on this podcast.
Well, we are delighted to have you here. And I, in particular, feel so honored because I know that you're a little bit more behind the scenes sometimes in Fresh Starts. And so you saying that you wanted to come on here, like, I feel honored that you want to come hang out with me.
Oh my gosh.
Because I know that being the front facing person isn't always your first choice. And you kick that to Olivia sometimes. And you're like, you go.
Yeah. It's so funny because like I'm a Leo. So like I do want to be seen. But then also when you look at me, I'm like, don't look at me. It's like very like, but I'm working on being more of a main character. I just really enjoyed our conversation. And I think I mentioned to you that I'm in my friendship era, and thinking about friendship, talking about friendship is so important to me right now. So I'm really passionate about it and I love what you're doing. And I shared you with a friend of mine and she became totally obsessed. And I felt like the coolest girl in the room that I got to like introduce her to something like, to you.
Well, thank you for sharing me with your friends, friend of a friend.
Of course.
And you just dropped my new favorite phrase that I learned from you, which is I'm in my friendship era. Will you tell us all a little bit about what that means to you?
Sure. So just like quick backstory. I grew up in a school environment I did not really have a lot of friends at. And I always had my sister. Olivia and I have always been really close. We never hated each other as sisters. We never had that, probably because of a lot of things that we went through in our childhood. We're about 2.5 years apart. And so I had that. And then when I went to high school, I think I struggled a lot with female friendship in particular. There was definitely some competition and jealousy that I felt. And I just also think I wasn't really finding, it's funny because I say this, but like actually one of my closest friends now was one of my friends in high school. But like I felt like at the time I didn't know exactly how to maybe connect with people in that capacity with women more. And I think my best friend in high school was a guy, and he still is a very, very, very close friend of mine. When I was in college, that was when I fell in love with like a girlfriend for the first time, where I was like, that kind of like, I showed up at her dorm. I had bought 2 pairs of shoes and I texted her like, she was a girl from class, that I had met in like a Russian avant-garde class. And I was like, hey, I bought these 2 pairs of shoes. Like, I'm going to come by and like, we can decide which one I'm going to keep. And we talked for like 5 hours. And I'd had close girlfriends before that, but and that was the one I still get likes on your reel. That reel went off the wall about friendship breakups.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
That reel.
Yes, it did.
And I commented like, she broke my heart that one. 10 years later, she broke my heart. And since then I've sort of been figuring out what female friendship is. And so much of it for me was removing myself from situations where I felt competitive with women. And removing myself from situations where I felt like I couldn't assume somebody's intentions were good and where I couldn't assume their motivations were good. And I've gotten rewarded with some of like the sweetest, dearest women in my life. And I just feel like the thing that I want around me is just that female energy right now. And that of like, I've had to learn how to be vulnerable. I passed for a lot of years because I cry easily. but you can actually cry easily
Yeah.
and not really share yourself with people.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, we've held each other through divorces and breakups and big moves and falling in love again and IVF and job loss.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I need to be in my marriage anymore. And then watching them work it out and figure it out and stay in their marriage and supporting them through all of that. And it's like I opened a door and the other side was just this amazing event that I had no idea was even possible because I wasn't super raised seeing that. You know, that wasn't something that I had access to for whatever reasons. And I think for me too, like having friends that were not related to my sister and that, you know, were away from her and getting to sort of each of us get to have these really good friends and then get to come back together and be like, support each other's people too was really beautiful. So yeah, I feel like I'm in my friendship era where I like love deeply and I have these like meaningful relationships. And I live in Scotland, so I don't see my friends a lot, but I Marco Polo with them.
I love Marco Polo.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Like, I love Marco Polo. Jen and Melissa are on Marco Polo. Then I have like my friend Emily is on WhatsApp and, you know, other friends that are on like text or DM or things like that. And, you know, the random little phone calls throughout the day. I was laughing because my friend Emily was texting me and I was like, I'm going to take a piece of advice from Alex and I'm just going to be like, I'm just going to call you. Like, and I texted her. I was like, is it okay if I just call you? She was like, please don't. She was like, I can't.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah.
And I was like, that too? That's fine too. But it was funny because I was like, I'm trying here. But yeah, I just feel like it took me a long time to get here. And I would suspect that it takes many of us a long time to get here. And I think that the narratives that I was told was that friendship should be easy. Right? And that you're not supposed to work at it. And that you're not at school to make friends. You're at school to get an education. So why are you even worrying about that right now? And so it took me a long time to figure it out and to like understand that these are supposed to be lifelong relationships. Because I didn't see that. That wasn't mirrored for me anywhere, really.
The being at school, that's an interesting one. I haven't thought of that one. I haven't heard of that one. But now that you say it, I'm like, yeah, I'm sure that that's happening. Right? Because we're all learning how to navigate friendship. And when you have any adult, teacher, caregiver, parent, aunt and uncle, and literally anybody, and there's drama or you're navigating conflict or whatever it is, I could totally see like, well, you're not meant here to do that. You're here to learn. My mind is blown a little bit. Because I feel like so often the narrative when you're younger is like, now is the time to make friends.
I wasn't told that.
But that wasn't yours. Yeah. Great.
No, and I think it was protective from my parents because like they didn't want me to be in drama. They didn't want me to be hurt. So it was like, what's the quickest route to getting out of this? Well, you're there to learn. So learn. And it was a private school, so it was costly. So learn. And when I was in middle and grade school, like I was in a position where the girls were really mean to me. It was a very small school and I was in a bad situation. And I think I just learned really early to like be like, well, I guess I don't care if you like me or not. So I'm just going to do my own thing. And that's great. But it's a hard shell, right? And it makes you sort of invulnerable in a way that's not, I don't know, ideal. I think if I think about it anymore, there was probably just a lot of like romantic jealousy of like men being the center of that.
Like a whole episode on that.
I would classify myself as fairly like focused on men, especially in those years, which is, I've never admitted publicly. So yeah, I just feel like now is the time. And I also think, and this is, I focused on a man, but falling in love with my husband, I said to him while we were falling in love, like, I'm so excited to see who I get to be in this relationship because I've never been loved like this before. And I can feel that like the way that he loves me, I pour into other people. Like I can feel that plus the therapy and all the other stuff, but like, you know, that's going to stay like, you know, but I can feel that. I think that this sort of gets into the idea, like it all feeds each other.
Yeah.
I feel like this community care and self-care and loving yourself and loving your people and accepting love and being able to accept love and being able to accept care and giving care. It is this continuous squeezy tube universe shaped. I don't know what that thing is, but I have to look into it. I think maybe it's a black hole. I don't really know. I don't know. That doesn't seem like any of my business space. Like, I think it's great, but like, I got too much going on here.
But I get what you're saying. I have a diagram in my book, actually. It's a web.
Yes. I quote you talking about a web in our book proposal.
Ooh. It's, this idea that so much talk out there is about reciprocity and it just going from you to me. But really, there's all these people. And when, like you were saying, your husband pours into you in the ways that he's able to, you have capacity to show up for your friends, which then helps your friends' friends, whether you know them or not, which then might help their friends, cousins, brothers. And like, at the end of the day, sometimes my question is like, what is enough? Do you really need your friends to reciprocate in the exact ways that you show up? Like, what is enough? Because if you have stuff to pour out and you are getting everything you need back, maybe not from the same people, what is enough?
This is actually interesting because this is friendship related, but it's in the locus of my sister, which is that I realized years ago when I was talking to my therapist about what if I have kids and my sister can't show up for me the way that I showed up for her. Because I said, like, she's never going to be able to do that. When my sister had her babies, I was home with her oldest when she went back to work. I was the one that was home, which is such a great gift, right? I'm so glad I got to do that. And I understood that simply wasn't a reality. Like, I was 25, you know what I mean? And whenever I had kids, she was never going to be 25 again. And she was 25 before me. So like, I think that this idea that like, I'm going to buy you dinner and then you're going to buy me dinner and it's going to be the exact same and we're going to get the same entrees and the tip's going to be the same and nothing's going to have changed. Like, I'm uninterested in that, right? And I think the best relationships I've had, I referenced my best friend from high school, Audie. We've always lived on I'll get you, you get me. We don't worry about it. It always balances out, financially in that capacity. I've never thought about it with him. I've heard that like the best relationships are when two people believe they're both putting 100% in, right? And I think that it's so hard. And this is where assuming best intentions comes into play, right? It's hard to be a giver and to be in any kind of relationship with a taker. It doesn't work. If you are in a relationship with somebody, romantic, platonic, whatever, and they're not giving freely, it just doesn't work. If they're counting and it will turn you, a giver, into somebody that is counting. And I don't like myself when I am in that position personally. And so I think, yes, this idea, like, it is not a one-to-one. It is a web, as you say. It is like all of these relationships and you're getting little pieces from everything. And not only like, is it the way that my husband loves me, but it's also my husband saying to me like, hey, I just want to be able to complain and not have you fix it. And then I take that lesson and then I can realize, oh, when my friend's talking to me or when, or if Alex DMs me and is like talking about something, she's not looking for me to fix it either. Like, I can understand that is now a lesson that I have. And I think that we believe that like, right, like I'm going to give to you and then you're going to say thank you and it's going to make me feel so good. And it's not this like one-to-one journey where there's no ROI on investing in your community, right? Yeah.
I mean,
there's no direct ROI.
There's no direct ROI.
Like, there's no direct. There's tons of ROI, I should say. But there's no like, I like drop food off at the food pantry and then I feel so good about myself because I get to see a kid skip in there and get the cake mix I bought. Like, it doesn't work like that. That's not why you do it. Like, you are supposed to invest in your community. You should be investing in your community because you want to give and you want to share what you can while respecting and honoring your own boundaries. Because when we disregard our boundaries, we show up for no one appropriately, right? When we are tired, when we are exhausted, when we are burnt out, when we deplete our own resources, we're not good to help anyone, including ourselves. But we are able to show up in the ways and with our capabilities and in respect of our boundaries and not do it because we are expecting something in return. I think that's when we show up most authentically.
If you are out there and you're thinking to yourself, yeah, great, I would love to invest in my community. I would love to show up, but when? How? Like, I don't have capacity for that. Then I want to direct you to a resource I have that might help you. So I call this the Do Less list. But really, it's all about how to kind of cut the clutter, like the overwhelm and the clutter in your friendships and that feeling of needing to do everything. You see, I think that the way to solve that problem is to be proactive, sit down, spend some time thinking about the ways that you like showing up, the ways that you are good at showing up, the ways that feel easy to show up, and get really clear on what you can offer, and then offer that. Stop feeling like you have to show up in all the ways, because you'll start to see the ways that are right for you to show up. And when you do that, you can do what Jenny and I are talking about here. You can invest in your communities in the ways that feel right to you, that align with your capacity and your interests and your skill set, and you can let the rest go. If you want to hear more about the Do Less list, go to alexalex.link/do less. Of course, that is linked in the show notes. So head on down and find that. I think I would agree with that.
Yeah.
The way you're saying, like in your boundaries and whatever, I think so much of it is spending time to reflect on ourselves and the ways we like to show up, and we have capacity to show up in whatever the season of life is. And then just doing those things and investing and doing them partially, I think, because we see the someday ROI of investing in our greater community.
Yeah.
And like, I think the web analogy is there for me, but there's also this piece of the web that is like, I'm held by the web. Like, I know that I am showing up as much as I feel like I'm able right now. And therefore, if I ever needed something in some way, shape, or form, I kind of trust my web will catch me.
And a web is a very strong physical object. Like, it's a very strong structure, right? Because it has all of these many little intersecting points. It's not like a rope bridge. It's a web, which is it's much stronger and so it can catch you. I just co-sign. I co-sign entirely. What can I answer? I mean, I co-sign entirely. And I just have so many thoughts going on in my head right now about community care. And I think one of our sort of core principles that we have at Fresh Starts is like, how can you help somebody else today? Mm-hmm. Right? What can you do for somebody else? And I always feel like I have to caveat it by being like, and what you said about like doing what you can with what you have to give is so important. Because, for example, I live in Scotland. I'm a startup founder. I can't show up to my friend's baby shower in California and help her out right now. I can't do that. And I don't have the money to like fly in or like anything like that. But what I can do is I can be there. I can check up on her. I can be there to hear the ideas. I've offered to call certain members of her family if they don't pull it together, things like that, where I can be there in those capacities. I know what I have to offer. Everybody has something different to offer, right? Yep. My friend Jen, she's a chief financial officer and she's an amazing friend and emotionally there for me. But something that she is able to offer me is peace of mind when it comes to our taxes. Yep. That is something that I can't offer, but everybody has their own thing and everybody has their own energetic ability that they're able to extend themselves. And so I think irrespective of that, showing up and offering what you can when you can, and knowing that when you invest in that with other people who love you and who show up with the best intentions, and then you say, by the way, now this is the thing that I need, they're going to show up for you.
I mean, that's my experience. Something that's so interesting about you and this episode in general, right, is you talked about your hesitancy to make a variety of friends for a period of your life and then entering your friendship era. Mm-hmm. And, I would say that entering your friendship era and realizing these things is kind of, there's probably some switch in there from like scarcity in connections to feeling a little bit like more abundant and things like that. Mm-hmm. Something I always struggle with in the web analogy is for anybody that's feeling that scarcity, when you tell them this, they're like, you've lost your mind. Like there's no way, right? And they want that one-to-one and they want that expectation. Yeah. And you've kind of made that switch. Do you have any thoughts about that?
It's so hard because you and I talked about this on our podcast. Like, I'm in a new country. I really don't know anybody here. I don't know. I've made attempts at starting to rebuild. I have one friend here who's wonderful.
Yay!
But it's exactly. I'm very grateful for her. But it's like, I don't know how that's going to happen. And I feel bad because I wish I had better advice, right? Like, and there's no way. And the way that I met people that I fell in love with was by hiring people that I really liked. And that's so crazy, right? So like when I talk about my close girlfriends, Emily, Jen, Melissa, I hired Melissa, I hired Jen's ex-husband, and I hired Emily at my old company. And what that was getting to have a hiring process of people in front of me and getting to pick from a bunch of resumes and then bringing them in for interviews and being like, and by the way, I'm forgetting people. Lucy was also another really close friend of mine that I met through work. And I think it's just like, it was being in an environment that was very aligned to me. That job at that company was the first time I walked into an environment and I thought, oh, these are my people. And then I got to extend those people. I got to find more people. And even my friend Maria was the receptionist, was the office administrator at that company after I left. I didn't hire her. Lucy hired her, but I got to keep, it was like in that universe of people. And so I think it's putting yourself in situations, and we did talk about this, that are authentically you.
Yeah.
And so putting myself in that situation was authentically me. That was where I was supposed to be at that time. And you had great advice when we talked on my podcast, which was think about what you want to be doing in 5 years. And then go find those people that will be doing those things in 5 years. And I think, for me, even right now, the first stabs that I had at going to meet friends was going to a co-working space. And that was, honestly, probably given enough time and, money. And like, if you take it out far enough, I think that probably could have worked out. I haven't been going because it's a pain in the butt to get over there, but putting yourself in spaces that are authentically you. But then this piece of assuming good intentions is hard because a lot of people are not capable of being benevolently intentioned all the time. And I can tell you that the women that I call friend, that I love, I've never seen a bad intention from them. And I say that like they've never said anything to me where I'm like, that was a little bitchy. And anytime where they have said something where I'm like, that hit funny, they've come back later and been like, things are really weird right now for me. Yeah. And I held grace for that because I know them well enough at this point where I'm like, and I think that it takes time. It takes time to get to know somebody and to let that fall in. It doesn't just happen overnight. And it doesn't just, even as much as you might fall in love with somebody at first sight or like at first drinks, it's still, you have to like learn that trust in each other and learn what that sort of looks like and what that feels like. And I found it really hard because there were a couple of stabs that I had with other people that were not, I would say, benevolently intentioned all the time. And that was not them being bad people. I think that there are not that many bad people out there, though there are some. Yes. But there was them being, listen, I'm going to leave room for some. There's some crazy, some difficult people out there. But I think most people sort of are in the gray middle and we try our best. But I think sometimes people are just not their highest vibrational self. And I've been that person, right? Like I've been a person where I heard myself gossiping about somebody and I was like, I don't even like it while it's coming out of my mouth. And when that person then texted me, I would panic because I'd be like, oh my God, they heard what I said. I didn't like that version of myself. And I had to do the work to become not that version of myself. And I had to, that involved a lot of emotional effort and therapy and also just like introspection of like, why am I doing this? What about this person is making me feel like I need to sort of make them look worse?
Yeah. I think that Jenny had so many great takeaways in this section that I want to highlight them. I want to simplify them. I want you to be able to take them away with you. So if we're talking about how to let go of that scarcity mindset and instead kind of believe in the abundance in friendships, believe in the possibility of friendships and connections and what you want, here's what I took away from what Jenny said. Number one, put yourself in places that feel authentic to you right now as this version of yourself. Number 2, assume the best about people. And when that is hard to do, ask them questions, talk to them, have that conversation. Number 3, leave space for the gray in your friendships. It is not black and white. So much of it is gray. Number 4, trust your gut. Do not trust your wild brain that is telling you all sorts of things, that is running mad up there and telling you a bunch of lies. Trust your gut. And number 5, every relationship, every friendship has 2 people. So make sure that you're checking in on yourself as well. Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate that answer. I appreciate the honesty because I think that so many people are going to identify with that, right? I think, I guess I would wonder, because you have seen kind of that web, you've built that in part of your life. Do you think there's any sort of trust that like it is possible because you've seen it?
I 100% believe that it is possible. I think that it doesn't need to be big. Like the web of people, the web that we're talking about is actually not a web of people. It's a web of experiences, right? So your web could be actually 2 people, but what we're talking about is that not that I give to you, you give that back to me. It's not tossing a ball back and forth, right? Mm-hmm. It is conversations and it is sharing and it is emotional vulnerability and it is, hey, can you just look this up for me? Or I thought of you. Like it's all of these things. So a web can be just 2 people. Because I know it's really daunting, especially like I said, I'm 36. I'm living in a new country. I'm very, very, very happy to stay at home with my husband all the time. So it's like, I know that I have to push myself out of the house a little bit. So it can be very small because finding a lot of people is hard. Life is not actually like Friends, sadly, the show Friends. But I think that it's definitely possible.
Well, you're not cut off from your other web either, right?
No,
so
I am not.
Making a couple of new connections there.
Yes.
Fills in kind of a local web that you need. And those people are going to have other people they know probably. So that fills in some of those periphery things. You have your people at home who would fill in for certain things. You have your husband. I mean, heck, I fill into your web. And if you message me with something that specifically you were like, we're trying to find this person to do this thing.
Oh my gosh.
I'd be like, let me tap into my web. And like, that's how the web is created.
That is a wonderful point. Yes. And I think this is a beautiful point, and I'm zoning out like while I'm talking, but I think that internet friendships get like a really bad rap.
I would agree.
And I believe strongly in internet friends. And I have friends that are people that root for me more than my own family does, you know, that I've never met in person. Mm-hmm. And I saw there was a tweet the other day that was like, has anybody actually had an internet friend that's lasted more than 6 months? And Olivia and I were like, yeah, 20 years. We've had internet friends for 20 years. Like I have people that come and go and that have made huge influences on my life. And so, yes, the internet thing and keeping the real life friends that you connect with through the internet because of distance and space and all those things. Like it is, yes, your web can be very big, but I think the core part that you were really talking about, which was making the interchange that I made and that I watched other people make. Mm-hmm. And also making that interchange and then going, oh, I've made this interchange and I don't want to be like that anymore. I don't want to be that kind of frenemy, right? Which is really what I would have called it. It was a frenemy. And then you start being able to see when other people are doing it. And you start being like, I'm showing up with you with all love and all respect, and you're not capable for whatever reason, not because you're a bad person, but because maybe I trigger something in you. Maybe you're annoyed with me. Maybe you don't like me that much, which is also okay. Like not everybody is like everybody. And sometimes it's hard to be like, we don't really know. We don't really have language of being like, listen, I don't think that we should be friends anymore.
So that is a great call out. And actually something I have truly been thinking about in the past couple weeks. So I had an interaction with somebody that was just very much an acquaintance type interaction, but I've seen this person a few times. Mm-hmm. And there's been some like, hey, let's get together before this thing. And I've showed up with other people and partook. And I had an interaction recently that after said interaction, I had an immediate moment of like, I have zero interest. This is not right for me. I'm not saying that person's a bad person. I'm not saying that we couldn't maybe figure it out. I don't know. But this just the energy feels off.
Yeah.
And like, I'm good. And I've never really talked about that on here, but you're bringing it up. So I want to acknowledge it. Like, I think that's really a part of it too, is getting to a place where you feel that and you're just like, nope, not worth my time redirecting my energy over here.
Yeah. So I have a lot to say about that. So on a very quite local level, it was funny. So I went to this co-working space. I've gone like a handful of times. And the first day it was very social. And there were some women there that were very comfortable in the space. And I think that was part of it for them. And they had really, really large Instagram followings because that was their job, was that they had these Instagrams. And I was like, I introduced myself, whatever. And I was like, I followed you. And they said, that was fast. And I was like, you have hundreds of thousands of followers. I actually didn't say this. I once followed you before, but then I didn't really care about your content. So I unfollowed you. Like, I don't have to know. What are you talking about? That was fast. That's why would you say that to me? What a weird thing to say. Yeah. Okay. Sorry for supporting you. And so I was like, you're literally telling me about the intimate details of how you conceived your child. And that was fast. And I was like, okay. And so I left and I was like, that was great, whatever. And the next time when I went back, they saw me and they acted like they didn't remember my name. Fair enough. You don't have to remember my name. But it was one of those things where I was like, I'm not getting the vibes here. And that's okay. Like, again, they seem like really lovely women. It doesn't have to be for me. And I think that it's important to just go, not everybody's going to be for me. Mm-hmm. And part of that is other people's opinions of you are none of your business.
Yeah.
Right. And so they can think whatever they want. I can think whatever I want. But being able to say, like, I don't think that I can engage in this friendship anymore. I don't have words for it. I don't know if I've done it elegantly over the years, but I do know that I feel that way sometimes. And I also know that I have felt that way about people and then come back to them too. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there's that too. I don't know if actually, I'm not going to say this person's name because they weren't particularly nice to me, but there is somebody that talks a lot about friendship on TikTok. And she always says, like, you don't need to do a big friendship breakup. Like, sometimes you do. Sometimes you need to tell somebody what's going on, but you're also just allowed to take a step back. And I believe in that because this whole thing of like, everything has to be a conversation and this. And so I've had friends, for example, when I was falling in love with my husband, who lives here in Scotland and I was living in New York, and he was really wonderful. And I was really excited about him. And I was telling some of my girlfriends, this happened or that happened. And some of them were like, I think he's just trying to sleep with you. And I was like, I mean, that seems like a really long con.
Yeah.
Like,
we don't even live in the same country. Okay.
Exactly. And I was like, I had enough faith in who they were. And I had enough evidence of who they were. And I also knew enough about what was going on with them where I was like, Roger that. You can't handle this right now. I'm going to take a step back from talking about this. I'm going to stay connected with you in this way, in another way. We could talk about other things. And you know what? They're in different places in their lives right now, and they're doing great. And they were able to come back. And I'm glad for that because I think that there was another version of me that would have been like, well, see you never.
Yeah, like this is the end. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to see what happens.
This right here is such a perfect example of something that I talk about all the time, which is cutting off just a part of a friendship. In this example that Jenny just gave us, some good friends of hers were saying things about a new romantic relationship of Jenny's that just didn't feel aligned. Jenny was like, I think something maybe is up with them, or I think they need more time to process this. And I think a lot of people would jump to, well, they're just not my friend, and I'm going to cut off the whole friendship. And you can do that. You can do that. And if they keep doing this, if friends keep repeating these patterns, then don't ignore that. Sure, end the friendship. But I just want to point out what a great example this is of Jenny realizing that these friends maybe needed a little bit more time to process, or just weren't the right friends for this area of her life, or this was just not the moment for them to be her support in this, whatever the reason is, she decided this romantic relationship part of her life was not something she was going to talk about with them right now. So the next time that you want to jump to the space of just entirely ending the friendship, remember this. You can, instead of saying, my friends don't support me, you can say, my friends currently can't support me in one area. Therefore, we're just going to focus our friendship on other things.
And that's not always the case, right? I had told you about somebody else that was in my life that I was like, okay, well, now it's been enough. You haven't put in the good, right? As far as the web goes, like you have to put in the good.
Mm-hmm.
And this person had only been sort of putting in judgmental negative statements. And it's like, if all I'm going to get from you is judgment and negativity, then I don't think I'm going to hang out for that.
No, I mean, you're building up, I call it evidence. You're building up evidence that you, over time,
Yes.
right, with those other friends
Yes.
that were not in the great place to talk about a romantic relationship, it sounds like at the moment, be supportive and
Exactly.
be positive. You had all this evidence that
Yes.
they really did support you. Something's off now. This other person, it's like you build up this bank of evidence. And at a certain point, you're just like, I don't know if I really believe that you are my good friend, that you have my best intentions, that you this, that you that. Like, there's so much evidence that contradicts this at this point.
Yes.
And recognizing that and just being like, okay.
The way that I see it is exactly like that. But the way that I put it, and I wrote about this in our book, this story may have been cut by now from the book, but that every piece of information you get is just a data point.
Yep.
And there's no judgment that comes with data points. We just observe them and we say, how does that make me feel? What do I think? Two friends could say the same thing to me and it will hit differently, right? That data point will be taken in differently because of all the other data points. And so I say, like, when this person said that final thing to me, I lined all of the data points up like gifts, because they were gifts. They were gifts about how she felt about me and about what our friendship was. And they were generous gifts that she'd given me over the years, evidence, where I went, oh, all of these gifts, right? All of these gifts that I can now go basically namaste, like, thank you for your time.
Yep.
Thank you for your love. That's it for me right now. You know, I ended the final conversation with this person on the phone by saying, well, I'm going to let you go. I love you. Bye. And I did love them. And I knew that my heart would stop loving them at some point, right? Like it would let it go.
It would become a thing of the past. Yeah.
And that was fine. And I knew, and I can see it. Like I'm I can see the curtains literally come down on that person and them taking their final bow in my life. And that's it for me. Like I move on from it. So you have to sort of look at all these data points and be willing to look at them. Like you said, be honest with yourself, which is the really hard part because we don't want to, that's icky to be honest with ourselves sometimes.
Yeah, it's hard to look, and it's hard when, you know, especially if you felt like not in every scenario, but sometimes like when there was this time period where there was so much good evidence and then something switched or something happened and you're like, but that time, and it's like, yeah, well, something might have changed. You might have changed. They might have changed. Like,
Yep.
How much energy and effort are you putting into this to keep pretending it doesn't not feel right to you anymore? That's the piece.
Yes. And also like loving people from a distance, right? So, and like being like, you know, we had our years together. We had our travels together. We had our little, you know, special things that we did together. And by being honest with ourselves and by recognizing that and by taking it into like full account and observing all those data points, it actually honors the relationship more than pretending those things didn't happen and then just moving on and having bad feelings.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
And something else you said about the getting like the same gift from people, but it hitting differently.
Mm-hmm.
I have an example for that, right?
Yeah.
So we'll use my book writing process as an example. I've been working on this book for freaking ever. It's been truly one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life is to write this book.
So I hear I'm not looking forward to it.
I know your proposal's going in so soon. So I have a variety of people, right, who will tell me that they are proud of me for finishing that draft or for doing X thing, like related to the book. And they might say the same words, right?
Yes.
And my friend, Danielle, let's say, for example, who lives a mile and a half from me, who sees me all the time and hears a pretty constant, like, ugh, like I had to do these edits, and I've done edits literally at her kitchen table where she's like, I can't believe that's wild that you're editing a book, you know? She'll tell me she's proud of me. And that hits because she has seen me sit at her kitchen table and want to pull my hair out, right? But she does not write books. She's in finance. Like she's she doesn't fully
other side of writing books. Yeah.
Other side. You might come and tell me like, gosh, edits are so hard. I mean, we actually just talked about this. I told you I got my copy edits back and I got, what did I have? I had 14,000, I think, on the dot edits in my manuscript.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how many you had for your proposal.
You just sit there. Yeah. Just sitting there and pressing accept. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think we had 594 in the first chapter, which it's like kind of like a double chapter because I forgot how long books are supposed to be. So it's quite long, but yeah, 594 over like 25 pages, which is quite a lot.
That tracks. Right. Yeah. And you could have said to me, I'm so proud of you for getting here. And because you're doing the same thing.
Yes.
That hits different for me because you're in it in a different way. And I
am proud of you for getting there, by the way.
Thank you. I am. And I could have another friend who really hasn't been any part of this, but just thinks it's cool that I'm writing a book, but really has no concept of what that takes, who tells me they're proud of me. And I can appreciate that. It's all the same gift, but they do just hit slightly differently based on like the context and the experience and the things like that. I was just pointing that out to people because I think that's important. Which is why I talk about building some like variety because in your friendships, because if I didn't have people who are also writing books, don't get me wrong, like Danielle telling me that, like it hits, guys. It freaking hits. It hits. But it's just in a different way. Like it hits in a, you've known me since we were 20 kind of way. Did we ever think I was going to write a book?
Yeah.
It hits different with you and like, wow, we're both doing this together and we're going to like have each other's book. It just hits differently.
Yeah. I mean, I think the way I see it, the way we're talking about it is like, if you picture your heart as sort of this 3D object, there's no amount of love that's too much for your heart. Mm-hmm. There's no amount of pride and good feelings that's too much. We're just all getting it from different angles. And so hopefully what ends up happening is you tell 5 people and your heart is now going to be completely ensconced in love, right? Every little angle of your heart is going to get a little bolt of love and lightning to it. And I think it's going to feel different from each person. And I do think that that's important. And so good and the bad, right? The good and the bad is, and knowing what that relationship is and knowing where that person comes from and knowing what's going on with them is also important too. Like coming outside of yourself and understanding that person's experience. I think particularly when it's a negative thing that somebody's saying to you or when it's a thing that's hurtful, of going, why would that person say that to me? What does that mean? Where are they coming from? And having grace for those people in those moments, whether you decide to, again, no judgment, no morality, but saying, oh, I reached out to this person the other day. I'm going to give pretend names like Anne the other day, and they were kind of snippy with me. Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, well, okay. And I reached out to Joe the other day, and Joe was also kind of snippy with me. Well, you know, I know that Joe's mom is in the hospital and she's kind of exhausted and her baby's not sleeping. And you know what? Anne actually has been weird to me for the past 2 years. And since I started Fresh Starts, she's been kind of bizarre to me. Right. And so it's going, okay, well, actually same exact response. And I get to hold grace for both of those people. And I get to say, I guess whatever's going on with Anne, she can't handle whatever's going on with me. Fine. And I guess whatever's going on with Joe, I understand that and I hold space for that. And then just taking that data in. Because I might be like, but Anne and I have the best time when we go camping.
Yes.
We have such a good time.
Yes.
And I don't want to give that up. But you know what? Anne's in a weird place right now. You have 2 choices. One choice is to go to Anne and say, hey, you good? What's going on? And the other choice is to be like, I'm just going to sort of like keep up our relationship in a sort of maybe a lighter kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to go that deep with her right now. But when we go camping again, I know it's going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
All decisions you get to make, none of them have moral judgment. The only you want to be happy. You want to be joyous. You want to have people in your life who bring joy to you. And you don't want people to make you feel bad. So like, let's protect ourselves from that. But otherwise, I don't know.
To close out this episode of some sort, the thing I keep coming back to is that initial line you gave me, which is community care is self-care.
Yes.
And the thing that I keep thinking from this conversation is like such a big piece of that is just deciding to actively engage in your own community care as self-care.
Yeah. Can I tell a really beautiful story about
please
that?
do. Yeah.
Okay. So my friend Maria has a family member who requires more care, and they get some of this care from the state. They're at a level where they get a person to help them out. And Maria has been overseeing the care of this family member her entire life. By the way, I say her name because I've had this story in her book proposal, and I asked her permission. I was like, is it okay? She was very excited. And I'm very, very proud of her. She is a really hard worker, and she's always held a job and then also as like a second job overseeing the care of this family member.
Wow. Yeah.
Yes. She left her last job because it was not working out and it was bad for her mental health. And she left, and I was trying to send jobs her way and trying to help her find a job. And I texted her recently. I said, what's going on with jobs? And she goes, actually, while I was off from work, I was realizing that this family member's care that they were getting from the state was really not up to level. So I called their caseworker and I complained to them. And they said, well, you do it. And because she'd spent all of these years collecting all of this information and doing this community care, not expecting anything in return, that was never the expectation. Yeah. It was just that she would do it because she loved this person. She's now being paid by the state to do the second job that she's always done as her unpaid second job, and being paid well, and gets to be with this person that she loves every day and make sure that they're being taken care of up to the level. And she's like, do you know how much more free time I have? She goes, I have hobbies again.
Mm-hmm.
And that is like a perfect example of like, she invested for literally 15, right, between the ages of being 15 and being 30, of taking care of this person for 15 years, and then gets to actually like have a life and make a salary and doesn't have to go to a job that they're being mean to her anymore. And I called her to ask her if I could put this in the book. She was like, we're just making lunch. That was what she was doing at like 12 o'clock on a Tuesday. She was making lunch with this person that she loves and that she wants them to have the best care. And because like it all came back, right? All of the knowledge that she gathered, all of the information, all of the work that she done came back to her. And that to me is like the truest form of this. And it was funny because I was going to work on that chapter, and then on like Monday, and I talked to her on Friday, and I heard the story, and I was like sitting there on Monday at the coffee shop, and I was like, oh my God, it really does come to you whenever it's meant to. And so her community care is self-care was that fed the book, and the book feeds other people. So it's all nourishing, and it all comes around. And I think that we have to look at this again as a squishy tube to the universe of like, we do not know what we throw out, who that will help and who it will support. And whatever we do, whatever we can do in our own ways. I mean, I think of the way that this podcast, I was sitting in bed and my friend texted me and was like, I think I'm being a bad friend. And I was like, you're not. And I talked her through it. And I literally was like, let me send you. I said, this podcast might help. She goes, do you have any episodes to recommend? And I Googled like friendship IRL, like bad friend. It came up and I was like, yeah, this one. And it's helped her. And so like, we don't know when we start doing things, but if we move authentically, honoring our boundaries and do what we can, I don't know, it just puts out good vibes, and hopefully those come back.
I think that is beautiful. And like, this is just such a heartwarming conversation for me, because I so firmly believe this, right? That I get up here on a microphone and like scream it from the rooftops. And when you use the word nourishment, that's actually what I call it in the book, is like nourishment instead of reciprocity. Yeah. And that idea, I have my whole roots metaphor. So nourishing the roots kind of goes with it, of like
Yes.
doing what you can to nourish others and focusing on like, are you getting the nourishment you need back? What do you need? Asking for that, getting it out there. I do think sometimes when I talk about it, like I mentioned, people just kind of think I am wild. Like, in the world we live in,
Yeah.
how is that possible? And it is just always so refreshing for me to talk to somebody else who is out there with a microphone screaming the same thing, where we're both hopefully getting more people who are slowly trying to tiptoe their way into this.
First of all, I think nourishment is such a good metaphor for this too, because when we nourish ourselves, we don't eat a tomato, right? We eat tomato sauce on pasta. And how many ingredients go into that tomato sauce and pasta, right? And this is kind of what we're saying. It's not about, I plant a tomato, I eat a tomato, right? It's Chicken Little of like, you have to get the bread and you have to get the flour, you have to get the milk, like you have to get all the ingredients and you put them together and you make a meal together and then you get nourished. But also, yes, I mean, I think that it is such a blessing to find other people who are on the same soapbox as us. Because I think that Olivia and I talk a lot about, like, we didn't go to business school. But I feel like we have a graduating class. And I talk a lot about this, with people of like, you are somebody that I think is in our class of people, our graduating class. Like, I truly believe that.
Thank
and
you.
all of the people that we're bringing into each other's lives.
Yes.
I feel like we're all sort of like gathering these people to us. I mentioned recording a podcast earlier today, and like that was with yet another person where I'm like, you get it. We don't have to explain it because you get it. And it's such a relief, because otherwise it can feel, like you said, lonely and a little like scattered, being like, no, this is real. Like, you can find community like this, but I'm building it. We're building it. We're doing it together. And we're doing it, like you said, you're part of my web. I'm part of your web. It's a very beautiful, exciting thing. Today I tweeted, to finish this off, like, I started my morning and I was like, I owe 3 people testimonials for working with them. And I just went to the coffee shop and I wrote 3 testimonials. I can only write at the coffee shop these days. It's called 12 Triangles. It's very good. And I wrote 3 testimonials and I sent them out. This is community care, self-care.
Yes,
I sent them out because I owed them testimonials. Like, I know I did. And I got the best emails in response of them being so grateful. That is my gift.
Yes.
Like, that is my self-care. Now I feel great. Like, there is no such thing as a selfless act. Sorry, it doesn't work out that way. Even when we do something and it, we spend money and we give, whatever it is, and it affords us something, or we spend something on it, there's still a little bit of you that feels good. And and that's okay. That's good. It makes us want to do it more.
I mean, I would say so, right? That's part of the joy of it, is like, it does actually feel good, as overwhelming as it is maybe in concept when you are, thinking about it versus doing it. Like, when you do it, you do feel good, even the small things. So
even the small things. And it shouldn't be the motivation, but it's a wonderful byproduct.
Yes. I hope the more people do it, right? The good feeling does draw you in a little bit. It's not the reason you do it, but it does. It's almost like
a hit of oxytocin.
Yeah, it's like exercising. It's like, at the end, even if it was a little bit of a deviation from your day, if it was a little bit of an inconvenience, like, that's part of friendship.
I have a great example of it. This is a lesson. This was a lesson for me, because this was a time when I did something and I learned a boundary then, which was that I was once asked to help somebody move. And my then boyfriend and I went and we helped somebody move, and we drove my car into New York City. I was living on Long Island. We drove it into Queens and I helped them move, and we helped them move all day. And then we went out to lunch and they didn't cover lunch, which is not great, but it's not my favorite. And then I got a ticket. We drove my car to lunch and then I got a ticket and I paid for the ticket. And I thought, this is a perfect example of me being like, oh, I still felt good. I was happy that I helped her move, but I was like, I can't do that again, because I feel too much frustration and resentment that I paid for lunch and then I got a ticket. And so months later, this person again asked me to help them move. And I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. Now, I loved this person.
Yeah.
I helped them out in other ways. I did other things for them. I was able to show up for them. But it was a perfect example of being like, there is a boundary,
Mhm.
and I don't want to show up in resentment for this person
Yep.
by betraying my own boundaries.
I mean, I'm so happy you offered that story. My book has a whole section. I call it my do less list.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
by doing less, you will actually have better friendships, because so often
Yes.
we've just been told this all or nothing. Like your friend asked, you should say yes. But if you can't for some reason, capacity, mobility, time,
Financial,
and you don't like doing that thing,
yes,
then
camping.
like you're going to resent them.
Yes.
So
yes.
let yourself off the hook, set your boundary, say, I really hope you find someone. And sure, there are dire situations where you go do something,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
But like, it's just such a good example. Like what we're talking about isn't, as you're saying, betraying yourself all the time.
We're not telling you to be a doormat.
No.
Like, we're never telling you to be a doormat. We're saying identify the things that you like to do and the things that you don't like to do and the ways that you can show up for people and the ways that you can't. Like, I have friends, that would be like, I can't talk to you about parent stuff because my parents passed away at an early age. And I'm not going to get it. I'm going to be a little sad and it's not going to work. And so then you have to be like, that's fair, right? We all have different capabilities. And so it's all of that. I think sometimes the unnuanced perspective of, so I should be a doormat and just do whatever people want me to do. And it's like actually quite the opposite. You show up best for your people when you show up in the ways that are authentically you and that feel good for you, because you will be able to feel good for them.
Yeah. And I'm really happy we got to close out on that, because I think it's just an important point for people to hear. And when you identify your ways, it makes it so easy to stretch that web further. We are going to close out this episode, but I just want to acknowledge, like, I have a friend I'd mentioned to you previously is going through something, and you actually were so sweet before this call and asked me how that person was. You don't even know this person. And I just said, I do love them. And I just said, they have some stuff going on. I didn't even tell you really what it is, but I just said, they're okay, but they do have some stuff going on. So I was right to be worried. I could sense that something was wrong. And you said to me, if there's anybody in the Fresh Starts experts or just, somebody I know that I
podcast episodes, anything
could connect them to or a resource I could give them, let me know. And that is you showing up in the ways that feel good and easy and strong for you to show up, even for my friend that you haven't met that I love. Like, that's what we're talking about here. That's the beauty of it. And that could be exactly what they need.
Yes, maybe. And also, like, when you meet people that are aligned to you and that you're like, I don't know you very well yet, Alex Alexander, but I believe that in 30 years I'm going to, and I believe that I'm still going to know you. And so it's like, I really like you and I really think that we're aligned. So why your people are my people, and like, I'm not going to like go fly to go hang out with her and make sure she's okay because I think she has people to do that. But I think what I can do, because the supporters need support too. Right? Yep. Keep going for another hour, but the supporters need support too. And I know that when your friend, somebody that you love, is in a place that is hard, you also need love and support. And so if I can provide anything for you, for her, and for you individually or bypass through you, of course. What else am I building this company for? Like, what else are we doing here? Except for taking care of each other, be good to each other, be excellent to each other. That's all we can do.
That is all we can do. Do you have any final things you want to tell the people? I mean, you're going to have to maybe come back on. We're going to have to like hang out again, but
yeah,
do you have anything you want to close it out?
You have to come back on Fresh Starts. I mean, on a Fresh Story. Do I have anything to close out? Just that it might feel hard to find your people, but you can find them anywhere. I have found a lot of wonderful people on Instagram, and you can connect with people in deep ways, and it's worth it. Even though sometimes it feels hard and awkward and uncomfortable. I mean, I wanted to be on this podcast and I DM'd Alex. We've been talking. I said, this feels scary and vulnerable, but I want to be on the podcast. And she was very generous and said,
generous, you were already on my list. I've already told you this.
No, but I think that for me, it was something where I was like,
I know. Yeah, you didn't know
it felt
yet.
vulnerable to me.
Mhm.
No, and I'm proud of myself for doing it. And look at where it got us. I mean, I was going to be on the list anyway, but I got to do that. I got to do that for myself, right? I got to ask you, and now I get to feel like that's something that I can do, which is ask for what I want.
Yeah.
Which is actually very cool.
That is cool. Well, Jenny, I'm so happy that you're here. I'm really grateful.
Thank you.
And obviously we're going to talk soon because
yeah,
we talk all the time now. So,
yes,
but I really appreciate you
exactly.
coming on here and talking on the mic and hanging out with everybody.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Did you notice the small intimacy that Jenny just tucked in there? If you don't know what a small intimacy is, go listen to episode 74 of the podcast. I talk all about small intimacies, but basically they're just these tiny moments of vulnerability that we can weave into our friendships that allow us to become closer without having to maybe divulge all of our biggest, deepest, darkest secrets to each other. And when Jenny said that she hopes this is a conversation we look back on 30 years from now, I mean, that's her way of saying hey, I really enjoy you. I hope that we are friends 30 years from now, which is a kind of vulnerable thing to admit, right? You're saying upfront, hey, I really like this friendship. And I think it's really easy to pass by those if we don't train ourselves to hear them. When we were recording this episode and Jenny said that, I lit up with a huge smile because immediately in my brain, I was ding, 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 small intimacy. I noticed it, cataloged. And also, I hope we're friends 30 years from now too. Go check out episode 74 and learn more about small intimacies if you haven't already. Some other things you should do. Head to the show notes. Go give Fresh Starts Registry a follow. Maybe go listen to Jenny's sister on my podcast, Olivia. She's episode 68. Or go listen to my conversation with both Olivia and Jenny on their podcast, A Fresh Story. And we also have the link to those scripts to support your people. When I tell you they are an absolute game changer, Olivia and Jenny have done all the work for you. Well, maybe not all, but so much of the work for you. When you're I don't know what to say, this solves that problem. So go check those out and bookmark them. See you next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of Friendship IRL. I am so honored to have these conversations with you, but don't let the chat die here. Send me a voice message. I created a special website just to chat with you. You can find it at alex.chat. You can also find me on Instagram. My handle at it's Alex Alexander. Or go ahead and leave a review wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. Now, if you want to take this conversation a step further, send this episode to a friend. Tell them you found it interesting and use what we just talked about as a conversation starter the next time you and your friend hang out. No need for a teary goodbye. I'll be back with a new episode next week.